All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I want to introduce my good friend Jason Duran. He's with Farm Bureau Financial Services. Jason helps businesses with business insurance. So today I thought it would be fun to talk about business insurance. Why is it important? What is the value of it? What are things to consider when looking at business insurance to make sure you're covered properly? Those kinds of things. So, Jason, let's just start off with, of course, why is it worth it for a business to have insurance? What kind of insurance should they get?
Hey, first off, Curtis, thanks for having me. I'm talking about business insurance and why I feel it's important for businesses to have that business insurance in place and what's the correct way to set up your business from the start so that down the road you can grow into that policy. And so, a lot of times, as business owners, we're learning, and maybe it's a new venture that we're trying to start, or it's something that we're trying to do as a side business. Sometimes we have a business that's full fledged business, and we've been doing it for years, and just not been guided on the right ways to have our insurance set up so we can protect ourselves in a time of need. And time of need for a business owner can occur in many different ways. Sometimes there's accidents that happen on a job, even with proper training. There's insurance that needs to step in and help take care of somebody, and whether it's somebody that was injured because of a job or a job that you did or you completed, you need to have a policy there that can help you in that need. If it's not set up correctly, then it can come back and affect you financially, as well as um, kind of a lifelong process, right? So we want to ensure on the business to where if you have a bad day, we can get past a bad day. But if it's a something that changes the course of your life or the course of your business, that's where we want the insurance to step in.
That makes a lot of sense because I mean, there's in a business, there's lots of challenges that can happen where we end up in with a situation of uh, unexpected issues. I guess I could say, as a business. I mean, if you have a physical location, obviously you want insurance in case there's like a fire or an incident at your location, if somebody slips in the parking lot or if they something falls over in your store and hurts somebody. I mean, that kind of makes sense to think about that. Or if you have a fleet, you do a lot of driving, traveling, you want insurance to cover your employees and your cars. There's workers compensation fund type insurance to deal with those types of issues. So what are some of the lesser known things that business owners need to think about when they're thinking about getting coverage for their business?
Well, a lot of times on the business, we feel like there's a something that has happened. Sometimes you don't have to be wrong to be sued, right? With a business policy, we're there to look at the policy, see how that would um, take effect in a case that may be brought against you, and see how that policy can then defend you in court if there's a lawsuit that falls within the policy documents that we can help you defend. Um, in case it's a frivolous lawsuit, right? There's many things out there that help us. Each business owner has different types of things that they do as they bring on customers. If there's a large order that you have equipment, for example, that you need to install, right? There is coverage there for that would cover the product until it's installed because it's still in your name, right? So if something happened to it, whether you're hauling it to the job site, whether you're getting ready to install it, but it's not installed and somebody comes along and it's stolen. How do we protect that, right? There's special coverages that we can help there so that you're not out on a limb for somebody else's stuff that you were trying to install. And that can be subcontractors that have different equipment that they're laying out or had delivered to a job site that they need to protect while it's still kind of in its raw form. Right after it's installed, that's normally the transition period where it goes from your ownership to the building owner's ownership or the contractor. So you want to protect that, right? Because that could be a large sum of money if that were to be damaged or stolen or lost in that scenario. Also, if you have a business where You take on other people's property, you take on possession of it, right? As sometimes it can be maybe a mechanic's off, you know, shop, right? That you take on the customer's car. How do you cover that car while it's in your possession? There's many things that can happen to a vehicle while it's in your possession as a mechanic that may need to be taken care of. And garage keepers coverage, setting that up correctly would be the right way to look at that to take care of customers' cars, as well as if you test drive the vehicle after it's done, how do you protect against that? What's the correct coverage? And that's why you meet with me and we go through those things, so we make sure we know the specifics of your business, not just a broad overview. There's a lot of other things where people, in a case where maybe your home is damaged and they have to remove your contents, right? There's a lot of coverage that, hey, what happens in transit, right? While they're storing that coverage in their storage units, there's something called Bailey's coverage, right? That coverage is not a normal term that people hear, but if you don't have that, right, that can fall into many categories. Could be a dry cleaner, for example. They take your clothes. Well, how do they cover that, right? What's the proper coverage? There's care, custody, and control depending on when you see something. How are you um, responsible for that person's item, and how can you be protected if something comes up missing? Same with somebody that's maybe cleaning a home, right? You enter into their home and you're left to clean without the person there. What happens if you or your employees leave the door open and somebody comes in and that's mistaken for a theft? Or what if something's knocked over while you're in possession of the keys to clean their home? There's a lot of different ideas that as a business owner you think about those things, because that it could keep you up at night thinking about it, but knowing if you have the right structure of your business policy, knowing that if something does happen and you've taken proper precautions in the planning of your business and making sure you've got the correct coverage, not always cheapest but the correct coverage, that can help you have those nights where you're able to sleep, because you do entrust employees with a lot of different things, and yourself as well.
So when you're looking at coverage, I guess a good way to principle to follow is to think about what are the things that you need to protect in the event of something going wrong, whether that's like you're talking about, like if you're a handyman and you're doing a remodel or an addition for somebody and you have a whole bunch of like piping dropped off at their house from the local supply store, you want to make sure that's you're covered in case it gets stolen or broken or something else until until you can get there to get it installed. So that would be an example of some of that coverage you're talking about. But if I have to take something that is of value to my business and leave it somewhere, then I want to have that covered. And is in the same idea is if I am entrusted in with the care of something of value of my customer, whether that's a car, whether that's access to their home, to access their things for like the cleaning example that you talked about as well. If I'm given something from somebody else that is of value, then I want to have coverage in the event that something happens with that to make sure I'm covered. And I think it's important to point out too, like what you had mentioned, that it's when you look at coverage, it doesn't necessarily it, the whole point of insurance isn't to make you money. And I think a lot of business owners really think about that, what can I do to make more money? And they tend to focus that way. And if it's not helping me make money, then I don't want to deal with it. Well, insurance doesn't make you any money. Basically, that's not what it's meant for, but it's meant to save you money in the event that something happens. If you're like you talked about with cars, if you have to go pick up somebody's car to take it to fix it or repair, or if you're housing it in your lot, and something happens, you want to have that covered because otherwise you're going to have to replace that car. So that's a challenge. If you do that like pet walking, you walk somebody else's pet, and your leash happens to break, that dog runs out into the like into the road and gets hit or something or gets injured, or you're never able to recover it because it escapes, you've got to reimburse that client for that. So what is that worth to your business to not have to come up with that money to do that, and to make sure that you can be protected. Um, so what about in today's modern world with the internet? What are some of the things that people need to be thinking about with like online stuff, remote storage, cloud storage, things like that? Should that be something they are considering if they have like customer data that they're covering, if they have storage of photos or other images or things? Is that something they should be considering about coverage too?
So you bring up a lot of good points there, Curtis. There's multiple facets to different businesses, right? A lot of what I talked about were physical property type things, things that we can feel, touch, see, smell. I mean, we're there. We have it in front of us. But you're talking more of virtual, personal information that people have that they entrust you with. And we've seen a lot of online hackers that will hack into that information, or maybe information's lost. So say you were a photographer and you took pictures of somebody's wedding day. It's hard to recreate that if you somehow lose those photos. There's a and that's really tough, right? There becomes some liability there, but professional liability. What did you not have set up? And so looking and knowing that there are multiple ways that somebody could look at being injured as far as a lot from a liability standpoint, where there's a loss of files, loss of product, loss of life, or injured, right? They don't have the income. How is your business liable for those different things? And everybody has a different knack for it. So it scares me a lot of times when people say, "Oh, I'll just turn to the internet and get the insurance I need." Sometimes there's not those prompts there or that experience like I have in the commercial realm to be able to guide you through what would be the best insurance, right, for your need. And a lot of people can err on the side of, "Oh, I don't want that because it costs too much," right? And they look at the cost side of it versus what really is it doing for me in the long run? How does that liability add up? If my business is worth $5 million, to have a $300,000 liability policy is a little um, misunderstood of what they need to do. Because if you have an accident, that company now has liabilities and they have assets that somebody could come after. And so it's really important that you set up a time with an agent that's experienced in the commercial field so that you don't run into, man, if I had only done this, if I'd have only just clicked that button or selected that coverage. And a lot of times, by having an agent, he can walk through the process and ask you the correct questions so as not to leave you out on a limb in a moment of need, right? Base those policies on questions that you have and really set you up for success in the future, because things will happen, and it's not always going to be a something that's going to just totally destroy you, but it may be something that really puts you in an inconvenience. And so if your insurance policy can stand up for you and what you're trying to do, and if there was an honest mistake, that your policy can step in and take care of you in that moment. But protecting people's information, their business setup is really, we need to ask all of those questions, right? Because somebody that's a subcontractor doesn't really think about client information that's stored. But what about payment information? What about CRM systems that may have sensitive information that needs to be protected? And if it's not, how do you have coverage to help you so you don't have that large bill at the end? And that can happen.
Yeah, I think that can, and that's the thing you have to think about too with insurance is you're not buying it for now, you're buying it for if something happens in the future. And so you want to be thinking about, am I going to say then, am I glad I have it? Or am I going to say, I wish I had bought it already, already. It's like that idea of when's the best time to plant a tree. Well, of course, 30 years ago, but the next best time is now. So you can eventually have that shade and that ability to help you. And it's interesting when you think about business insurance because we've talked a lot about like the properties, like assets and things of yours and your clients. But I have friends that they face some challenges with key person insurance in their business, whether that was like an employee that was a really skilled person that they had to replace. And so, getting a policy that says, look, we want to encourage either that person to stay, or if we need to replace them, we have some money to offer to help encourage someone to come replace that role, because it's super important to have that skill set within our business, or even business partners. If you have partners in your business, I have some friends that they one of their business partners was diagnosed with cancer, and so they had to think about, oh, well, if my partner dies, his wife is going to be my new partner. Do I want to be in business with her? Do I want to have that relationship? Do we need to set up agreements to check for that? And what about like maybe even buy life insurance on each other to cover things if something were to happen? So there's business continuation type things to think about. There's a lot of stuff that's important to consider for your business to decide, well, what happens if certain things go wrong? What if business owners too rarely take insurance on themselves. They'll do insurance on their employees, but like that's what the workers' compensation fund is. If an employee gets injured, they can get some reimbursements and get things taken care of to help with their care. But what if you as the entrepreneur get injured? If you're crucial to the functioning of your business and you're out, whether that's an injury or a sickness or something, your business could be in trouble. And so what are you going to do about that? So that's it's important to just think about that. And I like what you said, Jason, on in order to, I mean, the best way to do this is to not just go fill out a form online to get insurance, but to talk with somebody who has that experience, who can say, hey, what about these factors? Oh, if you're in this type of business, here's things you want to consider to help you out. What are you doing for these issues over here and that? Because now, like, you could sit down with somebody and go, well, here is some of the things that you might want to consider. Let's help you look at some scenarios. What is that going to be? What would that coverage cost? How can we make that work for you? And so that's the value of having an agent and having somebody that you can talk with. I know I've had uh, agents for our business that we've worked with, and it's so awesome to have somebody that if something were to happen, we have to make a claim. I can go to that person and go, "Here's what's going on. What kind of claim do we need to make? How do we make this work? Or what can we do with our coverages?" And then they can help me. So they become a partner on my advisory board for my business to help me run it better, because they can focus on the insurance side to make sure the loss is covered, that risk is covered in what we're doing. All right. So Jason, what is I know we've covered a lot of different things as we've talked today about this, but what might be like a closing remark or just a few things that you would want to make sure that people really understand about getting insurance for the different aspects of their business?
Thanks, Curtis. Yeah, to finish this off, know that there's so many unknowns, right? So many uh, factors that you want to look at, and as a business owner, that can affect you personally as well, right? How is your structure set up, and to make sure that you have proper um, guidance there on business setup and just continuation of your business as you talked about. How is that going to affect your business going forward? How does it affect your family? Right? You're doing this all for your family, and if something were to happen, whether it's to somebody else that's in the business, like you mentioned, a key man person policy, that's huge, right? If somebody has made a lot of connections, you want to take care of that person, and know that you are, know that they are important to your business as well. But also a buy sell agreement that can always be set up. But what's the funding vehicle for that buy sell agreement? That's something that you would talk with your insurance professional about. See if there's a way that makes sense for you to fund that type of agreement that you set up with an attorney, right? That there's important processes in this whole range of uh, setting up a business and insuring yourself so that you don't have a collapse if there is a calamity in your business that would just shut it down. I mean, litigation not only takes a financial toll, but it takes an emotional toll because you have somebody that's, you know, not happy or not agreeing with what's happened, and now you're in a litigation, and that does take a toll on a business owner. And I couldn't imagine if you didn't have the right coverage to, help protect you in that case, how that would affect you as well. And so with a lot of things, really sit down with your agent, look over that, make sure that you are asking all the right questions, and make sure your agent is asking you the right questions. If you don't have an agent that wants to engage with you in that regards, find somebody that will. I would love to. I love talking with people about commercial insurance. I love sitting down and seeing their proprietary information that's safeguarded with me as their agent, right? And so you do have to have a lot of trust because there's a lot of things that you don't want to go outside of that sphere of what you're doing and working within a business, and just know that that needs to be safe and needs to be confidential in that relationship that you have with your agent. And so that closing argument is really make sure that you're protecting yourself. And if you haven't really sat down since you first started your business, sit down with somebody. If you want it to be me, I'd love it to be. But just know that you just to bounce some ideas off of somebody that's been in the business that can help you and move forward for you.
Awesome. Thank you comment for all your comments and suggestions, Jason. We appreciate it.